Hello again, and it's chapter 3 time now. So, Mum and Lucky have packed their bags, rushed from the apartment, and they're off to the spaceport. And the Wolf of Estrellas is eating the stars. Chapter 3. Outside the apartment, Lucky looked for the crack in the sky again, but couldn't see a trace of it. The suburban sky looked totally normal and clear. The sun rose, as it always did, and by late afternoon, when they reached the spaceport, Aries 1 was over the horizon. The nearest planet's great red face made the clouds glow crimson. Yet he still felt edgy as he paced after his mother into the port. Everything was so much bigger here. Above their heads, giant vid screens flashed up the latest headlines from the war. From every rooftop, security vidcams scanned the people below. The air reeked of burning fuel and exhaust fumes. He was panting, out of breath, a stitch cut into his side. He wasn't fit like his mother was. He hated exercise and he hated his own body. It was always letting him down. But then he heard a sonic boom, looked up to see a ship taking off, and he couldn't help but feel a thrill. So often he'd heard that distant roar from his bedroom. Now here he was, looking at real-life starships, like the ones his father was flying on the other side of the galaxy. They entered the space terminal. It was a huge white building, its lofty architecture a monument to human civilization and its conquest of the stars. Its walls flickered with massive star maps projecting out into the hall, showing flights to every human world in every system from Aries to Libra, all the way to the space wall. And through its observation windows, Lucky could see the starships glittering in their landing bays, so close now he could almost reach out and touch them. There were so many of them in the port. The hulls were pitted from vast voyages across space. Heat haze shimmered around them, making the air look liquid with possibility. He gazed at them, spellbound. Was one of these ships really going to take him to the stars? "Let's see," said his mother. "Where shall we go?" Lucky hardly need to look at the star maps. "How about Leo?" he suggested. It was the most glamorous human system, famous for its exotic markets where, it was said, you'd get anything your heart desired. The only drawback was the large minority of aliens who lived there, too, refugees who fled the war. His mother shook her head. "I don't think so," she said. "How about the smaller moons of Aries? They're barely populated. They'll be perfect. Look, there's a flight to Leith. Let's get on it." She led Lucky up to a grand ticketing desk where the officer with the crew cut and headset was taking bookings. "Welcome to Phoenix Spaceport," said the officer. "Your ident, please?" "Of course," said Lucky's mother, as she handed over her identity card. Lucky didn't have his own yet. He was just a name on hers. The officer scanned it and nodded formally. "Everything seems to be in order, Mrs. Diana Ashbourne. What can we do for you?" "We want a flight to Leith," he said. "That one," she said. "That one." She pointed at the star maps and then paused, puzzled, because there, where the flight had been listed, was now the word "cancelled." The officer frowned and adjusted his headset. "Just a moment, there's an announcement coming." He looked up at the giant vidscreens on the wall. They were showing images of destruction, burning buildings, bodies on stretchers, people with hopeless empty eyes. These images were being beamed from a human world, a familiar one at that. "News coming through of a dark matter bomb attack on Aries 1, boomed a voice from the vidscreens. "Stand by for a message from the President." There was an audible gasp around the terminal building. "Aries 1, the biggest world in this part of the galaxy, had been bombed?" With a sense of dread, Lucky looked out of the observation windows. He was relieved to see the giant great red planet still there in the sky, though he thought it looked wounded somehow. The clouds round it seemed like the colour of blood now. The vidscreens filled with an image of President Thorntree, leader of the human government, a kindly but stern-looking woman with steely blonde hair. "I'm sorry to confirm that the aliens have struck again," said the President. "Aries 1 was a peaceful world, but nowhere is safe while they are at large. My government is suspending all space traffic in the Aries system as a security measure, effective immediately. If you see anything suspicious, report it at once to the Shadow Gods. With your help, you will defeat the enemies." The vidscreens flashed up an enormous image, the Alien King, the most wanted being in the galaxy. Lucky recoiled instinctively, and so did everyone around him. No matter how many times he saw alien features, he couldn't get used to them. The curving horns, the cloven hooves, the burning eyes of flame. He was glad he'd only seen them on the news, and not in real life. He'd never even seen a Shadow Guard. Nothing like that ever happened in the suburbs of Phoenix. But if the aliens had just bombed Aries 1, They must be close. Was this what his mother was running away from? Were the aliens going to get them? He couldn't feel the fear. He could feel the fear rising up inside him. It was spreading through the terminal. All around him, people were staring in horror at the vidscreen, shaking their heads at the images coming through. Some of them were crying. Others were talking frantically on their comms, trying to contact families and friends. The star maps were all changing now. The word cancel coming up from every star flight to every destination. Surely they can't just cancel all the flights, protested Lucky's mother. We have to travel as soon as possible. It's an emergency. I'm sorry, madam, said the officer. You better go home for your own safety. It could be hours, days, weeks. She leaned in closer to his desk. What about unlisted flights? She said more quietly. I know there are always some freelance pilots at the spaceport. Could you help us charter one of those? The officer looked horrified. No pilot would dare take off now. The shadow guards would stop them if they tried. He shook his head sternly. Why would you want to leave Phoenix anyway? At least there aren't many space devils here. Only the ones in the port, and most of them are penned up in that camp. Lucky bit his lip. He was afraid of the aliens, but even more afraid of the fact that his mother still seemed desperate to get away, despite all the obstacles. What could be a bigger emergency than a dark matter bomb? Whatever the answer, it looked like they weren't going to the stars after all. He'd been excited, gazing at the ships, but now it wasn't going to happen. His scalp tingled. He had the strangest feeling, the astrolabe in his kit bag. He had the distinct sensation it was calling him. He glanced at his mother. She was still arguing with the officer. Lucky couldn't stop himself. He couldn't resist. He turned away from his desk, unzipped the bag a fraction and peered inside. I'll leave chapter 3 there just for one moment.